Everyone knows Tom Brady. He's the world's most popular NFL player. He's the GOAT. Ever since the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed Tom Brady, the spotlight has grown in Tampa Bay. All of a sudden, everyone wants to know the latest news on the Buccaneers. Who are they looking to sign? Who are they looking to draft? The rumors, the gossip. In this video, I will introduce you to the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their current roster, their strengths and weaknesses, and answer the question of how good they really can be this season. This is why I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are legit in 2020. Before I break down the Bucs, make sure that you do Gronk spike the like button, and of course, subscribe to The Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this, and comment below your opinion. Do you believe that the Bucs are legit, and do you believe that they are a legit contender in 2020? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are an incredibly fascinating team. Their 2019 season was one of the most unique I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, the one-score losses, the up and down nature of their season, the incredible amount of turnovers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a team with budding superstars, a team with underrated playmakers, and one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL that absolutely nobody talks about. Let's start off with their 2019 season, the 2019 results. The Bucs in 2019, of course, finished with a 7-9 record. They did win 5 of their last 8 games last season. They had 6 games where they lost by 1 score. They lost to the Giants, the Saints, the Seahawks, the Texans, the Titans, and the Atlanta Falcons by only 1 score or less. In total, they were 3-6 in games 1 score or less. In 2018, they lost 7 games by 1 score or less. The last 2 seasons, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been an anomaly. They have been the most unique team in the NFL and perhaps the unluckiest team in the NFL. If the Buccaneers would have won all of their one-score games last season, they would have finished 10-6 and made the playoffs. In comparison, if you take a look at their division rival, the New Orleans Saints, who won that division last year, the NFC South, they would have finished 8-8 if they lost all their one-score games. They finished 13-3. That was the difference between the Saints being an average team or one of the best in the NFC entering the playoffs. If the Seahawks would have lost all of their one-score games, they would have gone from 11-5 to 4-12. That is the difference between winning these close games in the NFL. And sometimes that difference can be the quarterback position. Let's take an in-depth look at the Buccaneers and their 9 losses in 2019. Let's start off with week number 1. They lost to the San Francisco 49ers 31-17. While the score might not look that close, and of course factoring in that the 49ers were perhaps the most dominant team all year, they actually were being outplayed by the Bucs that entire game. You may not remember this, but the Bucs had 4 turnovers in that game. 2 of them were pick sixes by Jameis Winston, and they also had a blocked punt. The 49ers, the team that went on to start the season hot, undefeated, and go to the Super Bowl and nearly win the Super Bowl, really did not dominate the 7-9 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The second loss that the Buccaneers had was the New York Giants. They lost that game 32-31. They did only have 1 turnover in that game, but what's really interesting about this game is perhaps that this was the worst loss by any team in the NFL all season long. Go back and watch this game. The Buccaneers were winning 28-10 at halftime. No lie, 28-10 at halftime. They missed 2 extra points in this game, and they also missed a game-winning field goal from 30 yards out to give them the win, and they missed that kick. The third loss, the New Orleans Saints, 34-17. Seems like a pretty bad loss or an easy win for the Saints. They were clearly the better team, right? 4 turnovers by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that game. Drew Brees was the quarterback for this one, not Teddy Bridgewater. There was 1 pick six by Jameis Winston, so that's 1 touchdown. All 4 turnovers were interceptions by Jameis Winston. They also outgained the Saints in this game and still managed to lose by 17 points. The fourth loss, the Carolina Panthers, 37-26. A high-scoring game. 7 turnovers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers turned the ball over versus the Carolina Kyle Allen Panthers 7 times. 7. This is not exaggerating. This is 7 times they turned the ball over. 5 of those turnovers were interceptions by Jameis Winston. They actually also outgained Carolina by 100 yards, and they still managed to lose this game by 11 points. The fifth loss, the Tennessee Titans. They lost only by 4 points to a team that went on to go to the AFC Championship game, 27-23. But once again, the Bucs did not actually lose this game, basically gave it to the Titans. 4 turnovers by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All 4, once again, were by Jameis Winston. They were winning 23-17 in the third quarter and had an opportunity to win this game, but of course, turnovers. And eventually, your defense is going to give up yards and going to give up points. But once again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did actually outgain the Tennessee Titans by 140 yards and still managed to lose the game. The 6th loss is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks beat the Bucs. Again, another playoff team here. Another team that had success, won a playoff game even. The Seahawks in Seattle, one of the toughest places to play in the entire NFL. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by 6 points, and it was an overtime at home, 40-34. The Bucs only did have 1 turnover in this game, but they were actually winning this game at one point by 14, 21-7. The Houston Texans. They lost to the Houston Texans 23-20. 5 turnovers by Jameis Winston and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And guess what? Well, there was a pick 6 to open the game. If you take that pick 6 away on the opening drive of the game, not only does momentum shift, but the Bucs end up winning on the scoreboard. The last loss was to the Atlanta Falcons. This was another overtime loss, 28-22. This was the last game of the season. And of course, another 3 turnovers by the Tampa Bay Bucs. What do you know? Another pick 6. But this pick 6 wasn't at the start of the game. It was actually at the end of the game in overtime to lose the dang game. In every single one of their losses this past season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could have won that game. The only game that I will say that they straight up lost was that one Saints game that Teddy Bridgewater played. Other than that, you could argue that the Bucs were the better team on the field that day. They just gave the ball away. They gave the win away. They gave the W away. The reason? 29 turnovers in 9 games. If you do the math there, 29 turnovers in 9 losses, that's 3.2 or 3 turnovers per loss. That's absurd. I've never heard of that before. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. Jameis Winston was the first quarterback ever in the NFL, in the history of the NFL. And now think back to the 60s, the 50s, the 70s, when turnovers and interceptions were a lot more common. Jameis Winston was the first quarterback ever to throw 7 pick sixes. 7. That's 7 touchdowns that are going to be counted on the defense. When the defense didn't deserve that, that's going to be 7 times that a team is going to be derailed and the momentum is going to be taken and stripped away from your team. The last time a quarterback threw 30 plus interceptions in a season, which Jameis Winston did do, was 1988. That's 4 decades ago. In 2018, Jameis Winston and Fitzpatrick, so this is 2 quarterbacks now, 2 quarterbacks which are prone to interceptions and turnovers, threw 26 interceptions combined, which is only 4 less than 30, which Jameis Winston threw last season. So this has been a problem for 2 years, and this has been a problem with 2 different coaching staffs. This has been a quarterback problem. The Bucs have been derailed by the quarterback on their team, no matter who the quarterback has been. They ranked first overall in yards and yards per game and passing in both of those seasons, but they weren't able to win because they also ranked first in turnover percentage as well. So even though you're throwing for a lot of yards and you're gaining a lot of yards and you're moving the ball up and down the field, if you give the football away, it doesn't really matter. You're going to lose because the number one thing that matters in terms of wins and losses in the NFL is turnovers. It's a fact. To quote Bruce Arians, there's so much good and so much outright terrible. So why am I actually confident that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be able to turn this around? Not only with the addition of Tom Brady, but what is the reasoning behind Tampa Bay turning around this franchise? The coaching staff on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was put in place last season, a season where they drastically improved their record and their production on the field on both sides of the football, offensively and defensively as well. When you look at this coaching staff is arguably, from top to bottom, the most talented wealth of knowledge in the entire NFL. And I think this is a big reason why Tom Brady actually chose to be a Buccaneer. Let's start off at the top with Bruce Arians. Arians is a 2-time Coach of the Year. He is known as a quarterback whisperer. He has worked with the likes of Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, and the list goes on. Carson Palmer, he's been to NFC Championship games. He's won 2 Super Bowls as an assistant coach. He has a winning record as a head coach, 68-43 in his career with quarterbacks who are not known to be the same as Tom Brady. Then let's go down the rest of the coaching staff, starting with Byron Leftwich as the offensive coordinator, who is young. He is known as a rising, young, creative offensive coordinator in the NFL, who has found his place as kind of the right-hand man for Bruce Arians, who Bruce Arians has repeatedly praised time after time after time. And when Bruce Arians is saying your offense is pretty good, I have faith in your offense. Their quarterback coach is Clyde Christensen, who was a former offensive coordinator, a wide receiver coach with the Colts back in the Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Brandon Stokely days, and also was an offensive coordinator for the Colts, was a tight end coach with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the late 90s, and was a quarterback coach for Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. Harold Goodwin is the run game coordinator. Goodwin was once an offensive coordinator in Arizona from 2013 to 2017. That's 4 seasons of offensive coordinator ability and time and knowledge right there with Goodwin, who is an offensive line assistant coach as well as a quality control coach in Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, and Chicago. Tom Moore. How could I go without mentioning Tom Moore? You may know Tom Moore as the former offensive coordinator for Peyton Manning for over 10 years in Indianapolis, where they set record after record after record. He was their offensive coordinator in Indianapolis from 1998 to 2009. Another name that you may know is Antoine Randall, who's a former wide receiver in the NFL for the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he won a Super Bowl. He's also a former quarterback in college as well, so he has a little bit of knowledge from wide receivers, from quarterbacks. He's also an offensive assistant for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now let's flip to the defensive side of the football, starting with Todd Bowles, who's a defensive coordinator, mastermind, former head coach of the New York Jets for many seasons, and he went toe-to-toe with Tom Brady for many seasons, which I'm sure Tom Brady knows and respects his defensive schemes, and I think that's also a reason why Tom Brady was choosing Tampa Bay, because he knows that Bowles is going to field a good defense, really no matter how great the defensive staff and roster is around him, because he's a great coach. He was also the Cardinals defensive coordinator in his days with Bruce Arians when he was the head coach. That's the reason he was brought back into Tampa Bay as their defensive coordinator. and overall just one of the game's best defensive coaches, period. You then look at Casey Rogers, who's a defensive line coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was a defensive coordinator for the Jets when Bowles was the head coach. Whenever you can have multiple defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators on the same staff, which the Bucs do have, but contributing to smaller position groups, that's only going to help the experience and the wealth of knowledge of your entire room. You have Larry Foote, who's the outside linebacker coach, also a Super Bowl champion who played alongside Antoine Randall L. And finally, Keith Armstrong is the special teams coach, was a coach for the Atlanta Falcons for 10 plus years as their special teams coach, and fielded one of the best special teams for many seasons there in Atlanta, from the kicker to the punter to the coverage to everything. He's very solid and well known across the NFL. The Tampa Bay Bucs, I mean, they have name after name after name on their coaching staff, and they have so much knowledge, so much scheme. Whenever you have the coaches, you have a chance. Now let's get to the roster. We're going to start off with the offensive side of the football, skipping over Tom Brady, straight to the running back position, Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones is underrated. So last year, Ronald Jones carried the football 172 times for 724 yards, 6 touchdowns on the ground. That's 4.2 yards per attempt. Pretty solid all around. He also contributed in the passing game with 31 receptions for 309 yards, and that in total is 10 yards per reception, and over 1,000 yards, 1,033 yards from scrimmage. Now, if you compare that to who Tom Brady's main running back has been in New England for the past 2 seasons, that's Sony Michel. Ronald Jones was able, with way less amount of touches, to have a better yards from scrimmage, to have a better yards per attempt, to have more receptions, to have nearly the same amount of touchdowns. And I think what Ronald Jones showed was his ability to catch the football better than Michel, his ability to explode and break tackles better than Michel last season. He is actually deceptively powerful, which is something that I think he's going to bring more often to this running back group in 2020. Am I saying that Ronald Jones is one of the best running backs in the NFL? No. But what I am saying is he's at least very comparable to what Tom Brady has had in the past, if not better. And he is also somebody that I think is a little bit undervalued and underrated across NFL media and NFL fans, because he actually produced when he was given his opportunity last season. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of the only teams in the NFL to field not only one, but 2 of the top 20 tight ends in the NFL. 2 of the 20 best tight ends, talents at the tight end position there is. In O.J. Howard's first 2 seasons, he produced 16.6 yards per reception. Why am I bringing that number up? Rob Gronkowski was a big-time yards per reception tight end. He wasn't only a player that would catch the football in the red zone, catch the football for short gains and first downs, or catch the football and gain yards after the catch, which O.J. Howard also can do thanks to his incredible size and speed combination. He also would be able to catch the football deep down the field, almost serving as New England's deep threat. While Howard doesn't really play that role for Tampa Bay, he's a big-time yards per reception guy, and he catches the football a lot down the field. If you compare his 16.6 yards per reception in his first 2 seasons in his NFL career, that would be more than Jared Cook, who led the NFL in yards per reception last season. That would be more than a half yard more than the leading tight end in yards per reception last season. So Howard is known for his big play capability at the tight end position. Howard is a monster. He is one of the fastest tight ends in the game. He's 6'6", 251 pounds, which is the same height as Rob Gronkowski. And last season in 2018, which has been his best year in his career, his 3-year career, he had an elite PFF grade, which only would have ranked second behind only George Kittle this past season. So he's had success in the NFL. He just hasn't quite been able to fulfill the potential that everyone sees from him. And I think part of that is because of the offensive design, and part of that's also because of the quarterback. In 2018, Howard had 34 catches for 565 yards and 5 touchdowns in just 10 games. If you average that out to 16 games, a 16-game season, Howard would have 54 catches for 904 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's a Pro Bowl caliber tight end season. But because Howard was injured, he wasn't able to fulfill that. Now, when you look at Cameron Brate, he's one of the most underrated options at the tight end position in the NFL. He's had 2 seasons of 6 touchdowns. He's had 1 season of 8 touchdowns. His best season was in 2016, where he had over 600 yards on 57 catches. He's an excellent red zone option, an incredibly smart player who's great over the middle or underneath for the quarterback, which I'm sure will work out with Tom Brady. And when you look at the snaps played, 731 for O.J. Howard and 430 for Cameron Brate, I expect both of those to go up and see a lot more 2 tight end sets from the Bucs offense in 2020, which will only help them both in the running game and in the passing game. The wide receivers. You have to talk about the wide receivers when you talk about the Tampa Bay Bucs. Mike Evans, Godwin, and more. 2 receivers, Godwin and Evans, ranked by PFF inside the top 6 last season, the only team to do so. Godwin was ranked as the best receiver, according to PFF last year. That even tops Michael Thomas. Mike Evans was ranked in the top 6 as well. And Mike Evans is probably the most underrated elite receiver in the NFL. He's had 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons. I know, he's been in the NFL that long. He has. But he's been consistently great no matter the quarterback. And now he's getting the best quarterback he's ever had. The key here for Mike Evans and Godwin and for Tom Brady in general is the fact that when you have these 2 amazing receivers who complement each other very well and who are complete receivers, not only can go down the field, but can catch in the intermediate range, underneath and make a play. These guys, you can't just try and take away one of them because the other one is going to go off. Miller is someone that I'm intrigued by because he actually, for a white dude, has a lot of downfield speed, and you'll see highlights of him beating corners down the field, 60, 50 plus yards down the field, and making a play. And I think this is the type of guy in the slot that could thrive with Tom Brady. The offensive line is the unit offensively that everyone keeps saying, you know, Tom Brady has never had a shaky offensive line. He's never had a bad offensive line. First off, I don't know if you watched last year, but the Patriots offensive line wasn't exactly elite last year. And second, the Bucs offensive line, it will actually shock you at how good they were last year and actually how competitive they are overall. And I think when you just look at the statistics when it comes to the Bucs offensive line, you won't get the full picture about actually how talented they are, especially as pass blockers, because first off, their offense is centered around a lot of deep field passing, down the field passing. You're going to get sacked. You're going to get hit. You're going to have extra time to get to the quarterback if you're a pass rusher versus this offensive line. And for their ability to lead the NFL not once, but 2 years in a row in passing yards, you have to have a good offensive line to lead the league in passing yards. I don't care who your quarterback is. Taking a look at each individual player along the offensive line, starting with left tackle Donovan Smith, who ranked as the 20th best pass blocker at the tackle position last season. Left guard Marpet is one of the best guards in the NFL that absolutely nobody knows. He ranked 14th last year overall and 9th as a pass blocker. Ryan Jensen is one of the top 5 best centers in the NFL, ranking 3rd last year by PFF, 4th in pass blocking. Right guard Alex Kappa is probably their weakness right now on their offensive line, who ranked 37th last year by PFF, which is still a top tier number 2 guard in the NFL. He was a 2018 3rd round pick, so possibly in his 3rd season, he could develop to be an even better player. And at right tackle, Joe Haeg, who they just signed from the Indianapolis Colts, was an elite backup for the Colts. He could play rather tackle or guard and has played both in his career. We'll have to see what the Bucs do in terms of their draft. They have a high enough pick at number 14 where they could pick one of the top tackles in this tackle-loaded draft. Overall, though, you have at least 3 really good players on their offensive line, 2 excellent players, and then 1 young player that could develop to become even better. And then you have to take a look at the fact that when you compare Jameis Winston and Tom Brady and their game, the Bucs, you'll see that a lot of their sacks were a result of the quarterback holding on to the ball and trying to make a hero play. That's the problem with Winston. That's the reason he throws so many interceptions. He fumbles the ball a lot, and he takes a lot of sacks because he holds onto the ball and he tries to make a spectacular play. Tom Brady is the exact opposite. If Tom Brady doesn't like what he sees, he's going to throw the ball away, or he's going to make a safe throw, check it down, which Winston repeatedly ignored the check down and just took a sack or threw an interception. And that's not going to be the case with Tom Brady. Also, the case with Tom Brady is because he gets rid of the football so fast and he has such a pre-snap recognition of what the defense is going to do. And he also can help you in blitz pickup because he's so smart that he can see things coming and he can help the offensive line pick those blitzes up instead of Winston, who is just going to take the sack because he's not very smart, let's be honest. Athletically gifted, but not very smart at the line of scrimmage. Brady is, so he's going to be able to point to the offensive line and help them out or get rid of the ball fast enough where he doesn't take a hit or take a sack. And the differences there are just incredible when you're talking about Winston and Brady. Not to mention that Winston did lead the NFL in pass attempts. Let's switch to the opposite side of the football. I'm going to ask you something. Did you know that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense ranked 5th in third down defense, ranked 6th in red zone defense, ranked 5th in turnovers forced, ranked 5th in defensive DVOA, ranked 1st in run defensive DVOA, and ranked 12th in pass defensive DVOA? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense in 2019 was actually quite good. And a lot of people don't know that because they still gave up quite a few points. They gave up a lot of passing yards. And when you just look at those numbers, you don't quite get the sense of how good and capable this defensive unit is. This defense is fast. This defense swarms. This defense is aggressive and is well coached and well schooled under Todd Bowles. The Tampa Bay Bucs had by far the best run defense in the NFL last season. They ranked 1st in run defense in yards and in yards per attempt. They allowed only one running back to gain over 100 yards last year. That was Chris Carson of the Seahawks. Their passing defense, yes, it wasn't the greatest. They ranked 30th versus the pass last year in terms of yards allowed. But that stat doesn't tell the full story because they had the most pass attempts against last year. The most pass attempts against. That's going to lead to yards. And because nobody could run versus their defense, everybody just passed because they understood that they couldn't run the ball. A stat to prove the competitive nature of their pass defense is the fact that Tampa Bay did lead the NFL in passes defensed last year, meaning they had the most tips, the most breakups of the football last year on defense. Their points per drive was only 17th, so that's about average. But again, that has something to do with the fact that, okay, a lot of turnovers leads to easy field position, which their defensive starting position was 30th in the NFL, almost last. Their yards per drive would tell a different story, where they only allowed the 6th most yards per drive in the NFL. Their plays per drive was only 7th, which means they force a lot of 3 and outs. And their time of possession was only 3rd. Once again, forcing a lot of 3 and outs or forcing the team off the field with a caused turnover or making plays on the field. So there's kind of a myth out there that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is not really that good. In my opinion, the best traditional 3-4 front in the NFL today. Their defensive line is the reason they're so great versus the run. Starting with Vita Vea, who is one of the budding superstars of this defense, a first-round pick from last year. He ranked 14th last year as an interior lineman who's excellent versus the run, but 22 pressures. He showed that he could also rush the passer. Ndamukong Suh, who just recently re-signed, he played the 4th most snaps at this position last year and played very well. Suh still has it. He's still really good. He might not be like prime Ndamukong Suh with the Lions, but he's still excellent, especially versus the run, where his pure ability and strength will hold up inside for this defense. And William Golston, who's another underrated player, ranked 40th by PFF on 493 snaps and had 12 pressures of his own. You cannot run up the middle on this defense. I don't want to stress it enough. There's a reason they were first to run and first in yards per attempt. Now you look at the edge defense, which is where they get most of their pressure. Shaq Barrett led the NFL in sacks last year, had 50 pressures on the quarterback last season, and had the 10th best pass rush grade in the NFL. On the opposite side of Shaq Barrett is JPP, Jason Pierre-Paul, who had 8.5 sacks in only 10 games played. He played only 586 snaps, but still produced 24 pressures on the quarterback. JPP has grown as a player, especially as a run defender, and is still a really dynamic pass rushing force alongside Shaq Barrett. So you have those two. They did lose Carl Nassib to the Raiders, who was kind of like the third man in the rotation for the Bucs last year and played a lot of snaps when JPP was out with injury. Anthony Nelson, a 2019 fourth round pick, I think will really help in that regard to replacing Carl Nassib. He's a lot like Nassib. He's 6'7". He's a big guy, but he can also play on the edge, athletic enough to do so. Only played 152 snaps last year, but produced the 4th best run defense grade in the entire NFL when he did play. He could be the new Carl Nassib and play that similar role. Lavonte David is one of the best in the game, especially when it comes to coverage, where he ranked number 1 by PFF last year, playing over 1,100 snaps, ranking 3rd overall by all linebackers, and also produced 12 pressures as a blitzer. And then you look at the first round pick, Devin White, who's an absolute athletic stud. Last year got better and better and better as the season wore on. Another really good coverage player, really good sideline to sideline. And with those two linebackers in the middle of your defense, you're going to be great versus a run, and you're also going to be able to handle a lot of the running back passes out of the backfield and tight ends, because these two guys are just really athletic, and especially David, really smart. And White is going to only get better. The secondary, I believe, is a lot better than you think. And when you look back at this secondary in 2019, one thing stood out to me. Not only is this secondary young, which they've had 3 draft picks in both of the last 2 draft classes. In 2019, 3 draft picks. 2018, 3 draft picks. So they're very young, they're inexperienced, but they played a lot of snaps last year. But the other thing that I noticed is the trust that Bowles and their coaches had in this secondary in particular. The Bucs were the team that blitzed the second most in the NFL, which when you blitz means that you're exposing the secondary. And when you're exposing the secondary, it means that these corners are playing man-to-man or zone on an island by themselves one-on-one. Which, if you do not have trust in your secondary, your defense is not going to do that, which means that the corners are actually pretty talented, because Bowles would not ask his corners to play on islands if they were not any good. Dean ranked 12th overall by PFF last year, allowing only a 50% completion and a 73 passer rating. Sean Murphy-Bunting ranked 48th, allowing a 65% completion percentage and 86 rating. Still under 90 rating, pretty good. Carlton Davis is a personal favorite of mine, ranking 30th by PFF last year, 934 snaps, which was the most at that position for the Bucs. Best in terms of completion percentage, 49.6, and only a 80 passer rating. Davis, I think, will become their number 1, Dean their number 2, and Murphy-Bunting in the slot or in the nickel position. The safety position is a position that I would say is probably the biggest of concern defensively. And part of that is because Evans was out all of last season on IR. So they're going to get Evans back, which was one of their starters in 2018 and a 2017 draft pick, so another young player. Whitehead, Adams, and Edwards played a majority of their snaps. Whitehead stuck out a lot. Edwards stuck out a lot when you watch them. I would say Whitehead's the better cover guy, 57% completion percentage allowed, and only 373 yards in coverage. Edwards is more of the in-box type of guy, 66%, did not fare well in terms of coverage, so he needs to get better in that regard. Allowed 7 touchdowns last year. But if he plays less of a role and Evans plays more and back in his starting role and he's asked to play just a complementary role, I do think the safety position just there alone will get a lot better. But I wouldn't be shocked if this team actually went after a safety. We've covered the offense, we've covered the defense, and we've covered the coaching staff of the Tampa Bay Bucs. The last thing I want to cover here is Tom Brady. What will Tom Brady bring to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? That's the biggest question. The question on everyone's mind is Tom Brady the quarterback he used to be? Is Tom Brady still going to be able to bring this team to the playoffs and do the unthinkable? He's going to bring competitiveness. I don't think there's an athlete that's ever existed that's been more competitive than Tom Brady. He's going to bring scheme. He's going to get the best out of players in terms of play calling and scheme, because he's going to bring some of the things from the Patriot offense to Tampa Bay, which is only going to help and complement Bruce Arians and his offensive scheme, which I think will get the best out of some of their running backs out of the backfield, some of their tight ends, and maybe even some of their slot receivers. There's polish with Tom Brady. Unlike Jameis Winston, Tom Brady is going to bring details to the entire organization, and he's going to bring somebody that everyone will model themselves after every single day, which is a big deal, a bigger deal than you would think. He's going to bring leadership and belief in their team. With Winston or Fitzpatrick, this team did not believe they were a playoff team. But from day one, when Tom Brady walks into the building, the Bucs will believe that they are a playoff team, and Tom Brady will make them believe it because he's the best leader in football. He's clutch. The improvement in close games, which I brought up at the beginning, is going to be there with Tom Brady because he's going to make plays at the end of the game. And situational football. He just understands it better than just about anybody ever to do it and lace them up. Intelligence. From pre-snap, post-snap, and in preparation, Tom Brady's going to bring intelligence to the table. And the last thing, and perhaps the most important thing when it comes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is decision-making. Less mistakes than what they had before. Combining every season from 2016 to 2019, that's 4 seasons of football for Tom Brady, he has thrown 29 interceptions. In one season, just last year, Jameis Winston threw 30 interceptions. In fumbles, Brady has only fumbled the ball 4 times in the last 2 years. Winston fumbled 12 times just last year alone. Brady was hurried 55 times in 2019. He was only sacked 27 times, which speaks to getting rid of the football and making good decisions. Jameis Winston was hurried 60 times, only 5 times more. He was also passing the ball a little bit more. And he was sacked 20 more times than Tom Brady. So even though Brady was hurried more, he got rid of the ball quicker, which allowed him not to take the sack and take the loss in yardage. Brady had 40 throwaways, which is 9 more than second place Aaron Rodgers, and is 12 more than third place. And he had the second most drops in the NFL last year. That's not going to happen with this receiving core and the ability of these receivers to get open. He's not going to have to throw the ball away as much. He's going to get the ball out of his hand to receivers who will get open, and he's not going to have drops because these receivers have incredible hands and will make plays on the football, unlike the receiving group in New England from 2019. Brady threw 613 times last year, which was the 4th most in the NFL, and I think that's something that's gone a little bit overlooked from Tom Brady last year. The Patriots relied on him a ton to make plays. 613 attempts. That's top 5 most. When you look at the NFL and winning teams from last season, Brady is one of only 3 quarterbacks in the top 12 in attempts to take his team to the playoffs, and Brady ranks the highest on that list. Brady, more than any quarterback, was relied on a winning team to pass the ball more than any other quarterback in the league. So you can say what you want about Brady, but the Patriots still relied a lot on his right arm to make plays. So to sum it all up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are more than hype. Yes, they have Tom Brady. It's a big name. It's a big spotlight. But they're more than just TB12. And that should scare the entire NFC and the entire NFL. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button. And of course, subscribe for more NFL.